crazy. We were talking right before we started this, and you guys by the end of this year are on track for 500 ADUs built out. Is that right?
Yeah, so I think as of today, we have like 178 in process, and we've done just over 300, I believe, in the last. So we're somewhere in that realm. Yep.
That's wild. That's amazing. And I think you're also mentioning that they can be anywhere from 60K to 200K. So the viewers can kind of do the math on that. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we stumbled into. We happened onto it, and it's been really good for our business, and especially as real estate investors, it's been a huge shot in the arm for us.
So how many of those, let's say 500 that you're building? I know you're working on a fund where you retain some of those properties, right, as cash flow things. I mean, cash flow California, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
whole
yeah.
point is that
Yep,
cash flow.
yep.
Um, what percentage of those 500 are ones that you guys are kind of retaining and cash flowing, or are going to be in the fund, or how does that kind of work versus like ones for you guys versus ones for other people?
Yeah, so our business model has been that we attract and deal with investors that we've been working with for a while. Um, and we help them go through the steps of the process. Now, we're shifting from that model to a model where we're taking in funds on bulk. And so we're doing this private equity fund. And from that perspective, the projects that we move forward with in that fund, we have participation, like we have ownership in all of those.
Yeah.
And so with that, we have probably 50 of those projects in development. We have some ownership in. Some of them we own all of it. Some of them are for the fund. And then we still have a lot of our investors that we've been working with that we're able to that we're still working through the process on their projects. So
Okay.
we're kind of now moving into the position in our business where we have realized that the amount of equity and effort that we download when we go out and find and do a project like this for our investors um, versus the amount of lift that's required for us. By the time everything's said and done, um, even though it's painful for those investors, it's very asymmetrical. Like it's a very good return relative to what they could do just walking out on the street and buying a threeplex or a fiveplex or
Yeah.
whatever. And so as we figured that out, we are long game. Like that's our whole thought process. Yeah, we've got to keep the doors open right now, but we would much rather, instead of going out and flipping a project like this and making $200,000 or $300,000 on a deal, we know that if we can participate in that deal and keep it, that long term, it's a much bigger benefit to us as individuals and also to our clients. And so that's kind of, as we're looking at the way that we're headed, that's what we've been looking at, and we've also been able to say to ourselves, and the people, the investors that we've dealt with substantially that have done multiple projects, 10, 20, 30 projects, those investors get better returns than the investors that do one or two. And so as we
There's a
look at,
scale of economy
yeah,
with it.
well, there's, and really, like, even though this is this is kind of like a done with you solution that we've created for
Yeah.
our investors, even though that's the case, um, we're always making decisions based off of what the availability of their cash is, what the timing is for any specific um, city to deal with that property
Mhm.
specifically, what are the weird nuances of that thing. And so, like, if you have a garage and the plumbing doesn't run right through it, or like there's all sorts of weird stuff that does have an effect and is a factor in how quickly things can be done and what they cost. And so what what we've figured out is those people that we've already done a lot with, those are people that we retain and then we're going to continue to do business
They
with.
understand the process
They
and how
understand,
you
yeah,
resolve issues. And
yeah,
just real quick plug, if Cashflow California, like on Instagram and your social media, if you're
yes,
following that and you're watching those videos, you'll see a lot of those. Like you just had a foundation crack or something. Like you have these weird issues that just come up. Like it's not like you just come in and it's an automatic. Okay, these 5 steps, boom, bang, we're out. Like
Yeah.
you think like that's the plan, right? But it seems like from watching some of your videos, like you get there and you're like, we're on step 3, and all of a sudden now we've got this
Yeah, we got to
roadblock or
step
this
back
hurdle, or
four. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
over on that or whatever it might be. So
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know, the people that have been successful with us, these investors that we've brought in from our clientele that already existed, and some newer ones, the ones that do this and multiple, they're the ones that have the best success because for the most part they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that happens, we move on. And so like when a foundation cracks, which by the way, that's a first for me. I
I imagine,
flipped
I hope so.
I have flipped hundreds and hundreds of homes, and that is the first time that that's happened. But then we look at the project and we're like, okay, well, this is $1 million project, and we're into it for $650,000, and so $20,000 isn't going to kick our butt. And so, yeah, like, but those investors that can look at that, take it in stride, and move forward, and not like have this major stress case about it, are the
Yeah,
ones that we can work with. However, developing the fund gives us this position where we get to go out and find the projects, and we get to decide what's best to do with the project based off of best practices that we've learned off of our own projects
yeah.
and off of running projects for our investors.
And you don't have the individual owner and the investor, which obviously you respect and appreciate, but having them potentially out of the picture for the day-to-day decision making, the planning, the profitability
Yeah.
gives you more room to just execute a profitable situation for your fund, I imagine, right?
Correct, correct. And so one of the factors, well, two of the factors in that, one is as we've been growing, we've been onboarding new investors every time. And so there's this educational curve that you hit every time, no matter what. I can set expectations all I want.
Yeah.
But
Until they
if
feel
I
it
give a
and learn it for
range,
themselves,
if I
right?
give a range, I'm like, look, it's 6 to 9 months to get permit. They hear 6, and
Start panicking in
when
7.
it's 8.5,
Uh,
they're like, hey, what the hell? And it's like, look, dude, like, and sometimes that 6 to 9 is a year. Now, one of the things that we have realized over the last little bit, we were doing a lot of conversions to garages, lots of things like that,
yeah.
and still are in process on a lot of those. But they don't necessarily return the best. They're just the quickest, cheapest way to do it. And
You're
so,
actually gutting it and adding to it versus like a ground up.
yeah,
But with a ground up and you have your pre-approved plans,
yeah. And
that's
so
6 to 9 months.
that's the sneaky trick that I was just going to tell you, that, yeah, that is a real win in the fund. It is more money to do a ground up,
Right.
but its value as a rental is higher. Its value as a resale value is also
For the
higher.
overall property, I
For,
imagine the resale value is going to go up significantly.
right.
Now, on those properties, are you buying the whole property and then doing something like maybe a 2 or 3 unit in the front and then a ground up in the back, or a mix, or is the front property going to be a normal rental, or how will it work? Because I imagine with the fund, you're going to buy the whole property, right? Not just
Yeah, yeah, correct. And so that, I mean, what we're our target project is one of two profiles. Either it's a single family with a good sized backyard. And so this is for the fund. And that's kind of like, so we're shying away from garage conversions. And so when we do that, yes, it costs more money up front, but when I've got, our fund is 20 million bucks, that allows us to do 20 to 30 projects at a time and then refinance out of them.
right.
So one of the beauties with that though is as we look at this, we're like, okay, if it costs more, but it appraises for higher and it rents for higher, my numbers are better. So even though it's more cash up front, since I
That's more to
have,
pull out for the next
yeah,
project, though,
yeah,
right?
that's it. So I mean, it's so when I look at it from a 30,000 foot view and say, what makes the returns better? That makes the returns better. And then to what you just said is with ADU laws, there's a new one that just came out at the beginning of this year that says once you've had a set of plans approved in the city, it's now considered pre-approved in that city for your next project. So from a timeline perspective, when we were saying 6 to 9 months to get plans approved, then now we're saying, well, actually, no, it's 30 days. It's 30 days to get our plans approved because they're already engineers.
Because
They're
here's what
already,
we're gonna do, and they're like, okay,
yeah,
it's already approved.
you've already done it. And, look, the cities love that, right? Because the cities get their fees still. They have a lot less work to do. And, for the most part, the cities that we work with, they want housing. The middle housing, which is what these ADUs are, these are for the people that don't qualify for Section 8,
Yeah, they're
but then
affordable housing, but not Section 8, like super
correct.
affordable housing. Okay.
Right, right. So they're to serve the lower middle. And so for us as a company, we're absolutely capitalistic. However, we are also altruistic. All of my partners um, in these businesses, we all care about the greater good. We all care about housing. And I know that, especially at the position that we're in now, like a lot of people are like, these are like just rich guys that don't care. We do. We care. We care about providing access to affordable housing in every neighborhood, um, in most neighborhoods, right? So,
Yeah,
um, and so as we're able to do that, as we're able to go out and deliver this housing, the cities are excited about that. They want that.
they
And
want it big time. Like the first time we met, we were talking about it's 10,000, I
yeah,
think, something
yeah.
units that they want in the next 10 years, 1,000 units.
Well,
No,
and
it's more than that, doesn't it? What, I don't remember
yeah, I
but there's
mean,
a huge deficit for supply on affordable housing.
we need in our little area over the next, so in the Inland Empire, we need 1 million housing units over the next 20 years.
1 million
Yes,
housing units for
yes,
the next 20 years.
correct. And so, as that's the case, as we're launching this fund, we're like, look, we're being very
Is that
conservative.
five thousand a year? So, I
No,
don't
no,
know,
no, that's
50,000.
50,000 a year in the Inland Empire.
Affordable ones or just units in general.
70% of the need in the market is affordable housing right now. So yeah, I
That's
mean a
huge.
lot.
35 of them, 40 of them, or
Yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
might be,
yeah,
is
yeah,
thousand.
yeah. And so in our fund, the way that we're doing this though is this is our first time. Even though we've done hundreds of these units and tons of these projects, this is our first time doing it all in one fund. So from that perspective, um, we're coming out and being super conservative in what we create. And so we're saying, hey, we're going to be able to do like 400 doors or 500 doors, whatever that number is, when in reality, by going out and building, refinancing, doing it again. And so reality is we think that we can do between 13 and 1600 doors with that $20 million fund in the next 10 years. And that is based off of our actual performance, like what we've actually been getting out of the money that we've been employing and refinancing
Yeah,
out of.
yeah, yeah.
And so as we go through this process, we know that we're diving into this market that's underserved, because you've got two profiles for people that want to do ADUs. 50% of the ADUs right now are being built by mom and pop for their dad, for their kid,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like.
I'm looking at maybe building a house and putting an ADU down there for the in-laws because it's their property, like that kind of that scenario, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And so, people look at that and we're like, oh, well, that's been available for a long time because like the in-law unit has been available. In Riverside, at least, the zoning ordinances have allowed that for a long time. But that's not the same as an ADU. And there's multiple reasons it's not the same. One is that with a guest house, the way that you're supposed to be using that is if you're going to rent the property out, it's got to all be rented out to one person.
The whole property,
Yeah,
the main house and the guest house, or the whole guest house.
correct,
Oh, right,
correct.
right, right, right.
Or there are, depending on,
It's either a primary residence or a rental property, like no in between, kind of, or was.
right, right. Or if one of the units is owner occupied, then you can rent it out with certain restrictions. It's age restricted, or there's all sorts of different, and that, there's Riverside's zoning code, and then there's all the different city zoning codes. So that's one of the factors that makes it significantly different. And I do know people who have been evicted from a guest house because the city found out that they were renting that guest house individually and they had to move out. And so the city code enforcement got involved and they were done.
But has that changed, or is that still an issue?
So here's the cool thing. Now, if you've got a guest house, one of the services that we offer through one of the verticals in our business, our plan design company,
ADU design, right?
ADU design group. Yep. And one of the services that we offer is permitting unpermitted construction, and or like if you want to get that zoning, or if you want to get that unit changed to an ADU, even though it's a guest house, you can do that. And then it allows you to rent it out individually.
So it has to be actually classified as an ADU,
Correct.
Not a guest house.
Correct. Now, look, in Riverside, I'm born and raised in Riverside, and so you can see on my arm that I just
boom. Okay, perfect.
You can see my ink right there.
Yeah. That's commitment.
I got my oranges, I got my ring cross, so perfect. I'm there.
Yeah.
I love it. But in reality, with all the cities that we deal with, we've done like 24, 25 cities over the last couple of years that we've been getting permits in and dealing with from a code enforcement perspective on whatever those issues could be, permitting unpermitted structures. And Riverside is actually the best.
Hold on. You keep saying permitting unpermitted structures.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Okay, so like say that you decided 10 years ago that you wanted to build an ADU in your backyard. They didn't call it that then. It was, a second unit, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But you built it. You didn't get permits to do it. Oh,
so literally unpermitted. Yeah. It never got permitted.
Yeah.
And I think like if you were under like 800 or 700 square feet, you didn't have to get permits back in the day, or is that?
So for like, or
they just did
it. That's a good question. I don't know what zoning ordinances were back in like the 50s or something like that. But recently, the only thing that was permissible is if you're 120 square feet or less for like a shed.
Yeah, that's literally
But
tiny.
You're still not allowed to have power or plumbing or any of that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that as a flipper in my flipper days that I've never done anything like that without permits. I mean, okay, whatever. But in general, that's not the smartest way to go, because the cost to do the permits and then get it all legalized from a marketability perspective on a resale, from all the things, it just
doing it after the fact is more expensive than doing it.
It is. It's more, and we have people that we're helping on that right now, and sometimes it's a $10,000-$20,000 difference, especially if it wasn't built well. But we can help people change the designation. So you still have to go through a full plan set and submittal and tell people what's built there. But we have a property over off of Dufferin that we converted an office into an ADU recently, and that process was very simple. So it already had a permitted kitchen,
separated office. Okay.
Yeah. So we rented out to a care facility, but it's attached to like this 3,600 foot barn.
Oh.
And so this office was permitted as an office, and it had a permitted bathroom. So all we had to do is add a cooktop and
hopefully not in the bathroom.
No, plenty of space in this one. It was good size, but so all we had to do is add a cooktop, and then we had to add closets. So we bought wardrobes off of Amazon for
just anchored with the wall, and it was good.
Literally the cheapest ones that we could buy, but that was it. That's all we had to do, and we were able to get it permitted. But you have to pay the fees. You have to go through the process. And I want to say that our conversion on that cost us a total of about 9 or 10,000 bucks
Wow.
to convert that into a space now,
How big was it, square feet, roughly?
700 some odd.
So now they're renting that out for 1,500 or 2,000 a month or
I
something?
think we're getting 2,200. I
So
mean,
4 months, 5 months, and you're
yeah,
all up.
oh, for sure.
Wow.
But what, so that one is what your use is that's available to you. But the second one that is really important, many people have seen news articles recently. I'm positive on condoization of
Hmm.
ADUs.
Hmm.
And so there's a law called AB 1033 that passed at the beginning of this, or that came into effect at the beginning of this year, where now you have an ADU in your backyard, you're allowed to record a document, drop an HOA plan or whatever, and turn that into a unit that can be sold by itself.
On
Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA will lend on it
as a separate property now.
as a separate property. And so,
Like it's condoizing because like a condo you can picture they're like stuck together, but it's
yeah,
one big building and each one can be individually sold. So
yeah,
it's kind of one property. That's okay.
yeah. And so, I mean, it's so you can sell that separately. Somebody can own it separately. And so that only works if it's an ADU. It
Uh,
doesn't work if it's a guest house.
oh,
It doesn't work.
the garage conversion probably doesn't, or can it be
No, it
attached?
does, but it excludes what's called a junior ADU. Junior ADU has to be attached to the house and it has to be 500 square feet or less.
Uh,
It doesn't have all of the requirements. Like you can have a shared kitchen in a junior
I
ADU.
see.
Um, and so there's different things like that. So the junior ADs are exempt from that. Those can't be condoized. So right now, the way that the law works is that each city has the opportunity to adapt condoization in their city. Now the state's given them permission.
They have to choose whether they're going to do it, allow it or not.
Right.
Okay.
However, first of all, I look at this from a legal standpoint, and I just one of my really close friends is our attorney. We do a lot of business together. We own property together and whatnot, and so we chat about this kind of stuff all the time. And as we were talking, like the cities always could adopt condoization. Now
Hmm.
the state is just saying, like, hey, this is a great idea. You can do it.
It's more an
And
endorsement than a.
we allow it.
Uh,
However, they've also always been able to do ADUs by their own ordinance.
hmm.
So what I have seen over the last 5 years as these laws have developed for middle housing is that the state comes out with an idea slash an adaptation of somebody else's idea, either in another state or in the city that's having success with that thing in
Right.
California.
Right.
And then they say, hey guys, you can do this now.
Hmm.
Like cities all around California, you can do this. And then they say 2 years down the road, after 3 or 4 cities have adapted it and been successful with it, they're like, hey, you have to do this.
Uh,
Like now, so our perspective on this is if I'm a betting man, I'm going to put big money on the fact that in the next 2 years that we are going to see condoization as a mandate by the state. And so
you have to do that to an ADU. You're gonna
no,
have
no,
to
no, you don't have to do it to the ADU. The city has to allow it if
has
you
to allow
want
it.
to do it.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And so Riverside's pretty housing forward. They're working on some laws right now for the city that are pretty aggressive.
Homelessness and housing are the topic of every mixer, every chamber function, every meeting.
I
Everything that anybody's talking about are those
I
two
gotta show up,
topics.
man,
You
because
need to show up.
those are the two things that
You
I
need to make the Economic Development Council meetings. If you guys aren't chamber members, you should join it.
we are,
Well,
but
then you should go to those
we haven't
meetings.
been rolling up, so we
Just that
do.
one once a month would be, I
Yeah,
think, a good meeting for you guys,
yeah, we do need
and
to
some good
because
committees to be involved in because there's a lot of advocacy and
yeah,
push for those things, and the relationships with the city are helping progress those ideas.
yeah, and so when we look at that, that's where our money goes. So we have a nonprofit that's attached to our business. The bulk of our nonprofit is to help with education and homelessness. Those are the things that we care about. and we're pushing for housing in general.
Yeah.
And so like we care about those things, and as we're going through the process of working with the city of Riverside, we see that they're very housing forward. I wouldn't be surprised to see them adapt something before the state mandates it. um, I would love to see that.
But
It's needed.
the I've drank the Kool-Aid with the chamber, right? Just seeing how they interact. So take it for what you will, but that is the vehicle to help push those kind of things
Yeah.
forward, right?
Yeah.
If Nick and the chamber get behind that idea and start talking with the city and they have those conversations. I mean, we had Takano was there just recently, and if they say this is an idea that we want to talk about, they're like, well, we'll set a meeting and we'll have that conversation. So it's definitely something to consider, putting a little time into if
Yeah.
forwarding that is good for the business, right? Or for the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. Well, and so sometimes those things are tangential, right? Like I um I care about what's good for the community. Like we've raised our family here, we built our dream house here 5 years ago. Like we are not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So we absolutely want to make sure that housing is provided. Now it's interesting to me, um, because we do get, not a lot, but we get some pushback from neighbors on this
On
kind
the
of stuff.
conversation part of it, or just ADUs in general.
Yeah. Developing in people's backyard.
Well, I imagine it also depends on the demographics of the neighborhood, let's say, right? Like, oh, you're going to add affordable housing. And I imagine in their mind, like, you're going to bring down property values.
Yeah.
But flip side is it's potentially bringing up property values, right?
And yeah, and I mean, the reality is the statement that gets made surrounding that, like that it's going to bring down values, it's not true.
Right.
Yeah. And we can look at other markets where this has already been adapted for a long period of time and find that that's the case. So we have actually had a hate group formed for us online,
It's an
relative to
achievement, I
ADUs.
think, right?
Yeah,
It's an
well,
achievement.
like, and they put a lot of pressure on the city and went and talked to the city council and whatnot. And the reality is, when they got up and talked to the city council, I was not at that meeting because obviously,
Just end up
I'm
confrontational with
not
each other.
going there.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know that they were going to show up to that. But I had a few friends that were there, and the city's basically like, yeah, like ADUs are legal. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to permit it. There's a housing problem. Like that's just what it is. Like,
Yeah.
so next. And so now that's what I was told about the meeting. You may have some listeners that were actually at that meeting. I don't know. But what I do know is that there is a certain amount of privilege that exists within our headspace in the United States, where it's like those people or that demographic should not be allowed in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And what that is, like, is for some people, that's just a socioeconomic thing. For some people, that's racial.
Right.
Like, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter to me. We either have, there's two things to look at from my perspective. We either have property ownership rights that allow us to do what we want to do on our property that we
Which
own.
I think we should.
Yeah. Or we are in a position where our neighbors should be able to determine exactly what we do, because those things don't intersect very well.
Well, we're kind of, I could be wrong. This is more your space, but we're kind of in the middle of both, right? Because through advocating and changing laws, neighbors can affect what you do with your property. The one of the things with like Title 20, you're familiar with Title 20, and like like there was about to be potentially the law changed where it's not relevant to ADUs, but if a historical property, if they want it to be deemed a historical property, currently you have to get consent from the owner. It's my property. I don't want it to be, I'll do what I want with it. They were gonna, one of the clauses that they want to put in there was that owner consent would be removed. So like if your house isn't brand new, that wouldn't apply, but somebody has an old house and they go, we want this to be historic. Now they just go, boom, you're stamped historic. Now you can't take down your fence without approval. You can't change the paint. You basically live in the worst HOA ever.
Yeah.
So it's my point though is it's kind of a mix, but I agree with what you're saying. That should be one or the other.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because the forces that work to create affordable housing oftentimes also are the same forces that want to do that thing too,
Mm.
right? And so and sometimes
They
those
want to do it on their own agenda as far as
yeah,
where and how and
for sure.
areas.
And preservation, I get it. Like we own a historical house here in Riverside, the Holden House, um, with our attorney Ben, and we get it. Like it's a beautiful place, and it should be preserved. Like where there's government involvement, and then there's neighborhood involvement, and those are two different things. And
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah,
the way that we look at this is, yes, the law is on our side. That's fine. But we also believe that the people are entitled to safe and affordable housing. We believe that. Now, people often will say, like, oh, yeah, cool, you're a rich guy, like, whatever, you've got a big property. It doesn't affect you, so you couldn't care. And I'm going to recognize some of my privilege there and say, okay, at the same time, um, I have an ADU as my neighbor. Like, I own the property and I have an ADU there. I have a
so in your
rental.
neighborhood. Yeah.
I have a rental directly. Now, my driveway's super long, so still, like, people can make whatever argument they want. But I want families that want to be in these little units, like 700 to 1,200 square foot units. I want them to have access to be in a neighborhood that they want to be in. Like if they want to go to a certain school, but there's not affordable housing in that area.
Yeah.
Well, now we can create that.
Well, and you guys have, I don't know how many of these are managed by it, but there is your investment first property management, which I imagine tries to
Mm,
manage a lot of these ADUs.
yep.
And I assume, and you can speak to it, but I assume there are background checks based on
Sure.
background checks for
Yeah.
eligibility,
Credit
legal
worthiness.
issues, credit, whatever. Not necessarily like whether you
Yes.
fit the demographic of the area, but whether you are going to be a reliable, trustworthy tenant to the property. And if that's the case, then
Yeah. And look, here's my argument to that, like, because that's a thought process that, yes, obviously we're going to do that from an investment standpoint, but somebody can come in who is on Megan's Law, and they can buy the house next door to you, and you can't do
it's
anything
Megan's
about.
law.
Megan's Law is a predator database.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Like,
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
and so you can have a felon that buys a house next door to you, and guess what? Lots of felons have money, right? So just because you live in a special neighborhood in the
Yeah,
community that means something to you doesn't mean that you are any safer than if you have somebody that can afford a $2,000 rent or a $5,000 mortgage payment. It doesn't.
yeah. Bad people are in all walks of life.
All walks of life.
So
Like,
yeah, it makes
gosh,
sense.
gosh dang it. Like, what's the guy that the had that private island, Epstein, right? Like,
The
he's
top tier financially of life.
super rich
Yeah,
guy.
the
Like, so
scum of the earth, though.
and that's it. And I don't subscribe to the fact that somebody's socioeconomic status determines whether they're going to be a good neighbor or
Yeah, I
not.
don't either.
Now, I will say that there is an actual issue that comes along with this, and that is parking.
I was going to ask if, okay,
Yeah.
so I was going to ask if, especially with condoizing, right?
Yep.
Does it have to have its own access? Does it have to have its own parking?
It has to have its own access. It doesn't have to have its own parking.
Okay, so that could spill out into the streets, and I could see that being a concern for neighbors.
Yeah, and I get it. I really do. I also, two things. First of all, how many neighbors do you have in your community that have more than one generation living in that house?
Yeah, a bunch of our
A
neighborhood.
very
Yeah.
high percentage. Just
Yeah,
in California in general, I don't know the exact number,
right.
but I know the amount of houses that I drive by that have 7 cars in the driveway or
Yeah,
5
yeah,
cars.
yeah.
And so, is that different?
Or 9.
Right, right. But is that different? It's not different from a perspective of how many people are going to.
No.
The difference is how many people are you cramming into a structure versus multiple structures. And ultimately, it makes the housing, all of the pieces of that housing more affordable, right? The main unit, like the house that's existing, I don't, if it's a $3,100 a month rental as a house with a big backyard and a garage, and then I go and take away the garage and give a portion of the backyard away, well, it's not $3,100 anymore. It's probably $2,800. So that makes that a little bit more affordable. But then the affordable housing that I created from the garage, maybe $1,600 to $1,800 for a little one bedroom. But when you're staring down the barrel of $2,400 a month in rent for a bigger one bedroom in an apartment
Yeah.
complex, 16 to
Small. I mean,
18.
it's like studio apartments. There's some that are
Yeah.
2-3 grand for a studio apartment in Riverside of all places. I mean, it's wild.
Yeah. Yeah. And so,
And they're attached. They hear their neighbor taking a leak or whatever versus the ADU if it's comparably priced, but they get the value and the benefit of having their own space and that sense of ownership, or at least
yeah.
that freedom. I would say
Yeah.
that's crazy. It's different.
Yeah, so we like that. We think that that's a benefit to the whole market from affordable housing perspective. And so as we like, and I kind of touched on this before, but the ability, if you want your kid to go to King High School, but there are no apartment complexes in that area, and
Yeah,
I'm not saying that there may be
I think they're building one, but
there may be a couple up by
the point
yeah,
being,
but
yeah,
the point is
if
in
there's not
general,
affordable housing where you
yeah,
want to go to
yeah,
put your kid into a safe
right,
and strong educational environment,
right, right. And
and you're not
so
busing them or whatever, like
yeah, and so the ability to be able to enter into that market with the housing, I get that there are people that are upset about that and want to protect it. Fine. Like
but those people, I would imagine the people that are thinking about putting their kids into a good school probably have ambitions to not be in an ADU and will probably transition into home ownership in that area
yeah,
if that's
maybe.
their goal, right? I'm sure they're like,
I mean, maybe.
at
I
least they're
look.
thoughtful of that, right?
I used to think real estate investing was for everyone. It's not.
Hmm,
I used to think that home ownership is for everyone. It's not.
hmm.
And so I'm not saying that home ownership is not a tool to hedge against housing inflation. It absolutely is. And I think that it's a very valuable thing to the average American family. But we are shifting away from that model. One of the things that I think that is important for us to acknowledge about our identity in the Inland Empire is right now we're suburbanized, but that's not where we're going.
Hmm.
We will be urbanized. That's where we're going. You give us 20 years, that's what's going to happen. There's some really good articles that came out that on that at the beginning of the year. Um, Press Enterprise did one based off of a study that was given to them through the state housing authority, and that's just where we're going. And so
Well, this whole region is growing so fast.
it
It's just going to
is.
get denser and denser and more urban.
It is the fastest growing region in California, and it's one of the fastest
It's
growing
like top
regions.
10 in the country or
Yeah,
something.
that's right. But it's not going to stop.
Right.
We sat down with the city of Moreno Valley. They're a city that we do a lot of business with, and their major focus right now has been industrial. It's been mixed,
Logistics.
yeah, logistics, mixed use kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And they have done an amazing job over the last 15 years of bringing jobs to that city. And there are some really big projects that they are working on to do that. But who fills those jobs?
Yeah.
Like people from out of the city.
Well, you're going to bring in world logistics, right? That's probably going to be, if it
Yeah.
is what it
Okay.
is,
So
it's
you
going
knew
to be a
about that.
ton of jobs. But those are all going to be, majority of those people,
Yeah.
if it's not robots, is going to be
Yeah.
affordable housing
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And so, no, that world
World logistics or
logistics,
something like that.
that program or that product is amazing. And what they're doing there is cool. But one of the things that we've noticed and that we love with what we do, about 70% of our tenants in Moreno Valley live in Moreno Valley,
Mm.
work in Moreno Valley. Sorry, obviously they live there. They work in Moreno Valley.
Yeah.
And so they work there and live there. And that's the dream.
Well, and that now your affordable housing is also helping the economy, the local economy. They're not
Yeah,
living in San Bernardino or well, not even like Menifee or something to commute in, somewhere more
yeah,
affordable to commute in.
yeah,
It's staying there. The tax dollars are staying there. The spending at the stores. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah, and so I think that the switch from suburbanization to urbanization is a big thing to acknowledge. And our goal when we started out doing this, it was a flip hack, right? It's like, oh, cool, we can just do this thing real quick and it adds value to our house and we get more rents.
yeah,
Cool. That's how we were looking at it. Now, as we've matured in our business and in our thought process and in our resources, we're looking at this like, what does this look like for us as a rental over the next 20 years? And what does it look like for our community? How can we be thoughtful? One of the restrictions for parking, you don't have to provide parking for these units.
not if
Like,
you're close enough to a bus stop or
right.
public
So
transportation,
for
right?
the units we do, like almost 98% of the time, it's not even an issue. So understanding that usually what we would do is take a portion of the front yard and make more parking. Depending on what zoning says or allows, that becomes a little bit tricky. And so you can't, some cities require specific amounts of your front yard to
Hmm.
be softscape or whatnot. And
Yeah.
it's fine. Like I think all of those things are good. Um, but it
Yeah, we
does
don't turn a
create.
whole neighborhood into a cement lot with parking lines,
Mm,
and but I've seen where in some of your videos, I've seen where you've taken areas that are not like even visible from the street, are useless essentially, and then pave them into nice parking. Now you're tucking that away, providing
yeah,
the access, and
yeah, we try. Look, we're trying to be thoughtful and create things that are valuable not only as an asset but to the community and to the renter, who's going to be there for the long period of time and use that space. So we want to be conscientious housing providers. It, and that's our aspiration. I'm not saying that's exactly where we're at, but as we go through this process, like that's what we've been thinking about. How do we provide something that gives a lot of value? And sometimes that makes a shift. And you know, I posted a video last week about these about our fund, but I referenced the fact that we have just adopted a new design for one of our floor plans.
mm,
If you are 750 square feet or under in an ADU, then for the most part, most cities do not charge school fees. Like,
I was gonna okay, I'll ask you
yeah,
about that question later because that's a question I had in my head, but
yeah, there's just a lot of development fees and whatnot that you don't have
because
to.
now that's okay. So this might distract you,
No, it's
but I
okay.
was talking to somebody about I have a property. My in-laws have a property that my dream is to get to a point where I build my dream house on this property up on Overlook with the sub house I talked about. But one of the I was talking to him yesterday is like put another $100,000 into your planning for all of your. It might not be that much, but for your
Fees.
school planning, your fees, your process. So one of the questions that was in my head earlier that I meant to ask was when, especially with condoizing, where now it becomes a separate property, do they then pay those school fees and stuff like that? So I guess if it's over that square footage, they do.
Yeah, and so I mean, I do think from a fee perspective that the municipalities are going to have some discretion on how and what. Well, I mean, let me rephrase that. I know that they have discretion. So we'll see what they end up doing. Now, when the condoization hits on a statewide law, they can specify and say, Action City, here's all you can charge. That's what
Mhm.
they've done in the ADU law. Um, so we'll see how that flows. But I mean, my wife and I built our own house, as I said earlier, and in that, I want to say that our fees were like between development fees, like just bringing oh, actually, we don't have sewer, we're on septic. Bringing on our water line, bringing on our electrical. We had to put transformers
I
for
think I'm
each.
lucky. There's one sitting on the edge of the lot, so I'm hoping we can tie into
Oh, I'm sure you can. Yeah,
that.
but for our house, like our panels, I have two 200 amp panels on my house, and so like our system, we needed 400 amps of power, and so and I think each of those boxes gives like the ones that we have, I think give like 800 amps or something like that. But anyways, so I want to say that our development fees were somewhere in like that 70K range. Depending on how big a house you build, it may or may not be.
Well, I think square
Yeah,
footage will be less than
yeah,
what I
yeah,
imagine you have, but it will be septic because it's overlook. It's I think it's
yeah, yeah,
the higher. Like I think you're in
yeah,
that other
yeah.
the
Yeah, so
similar.
it's but if you stay at 750 or less, then you avoid a lot of those fees in Riverside. And so we have developed, I posted this video and talked about the fact that we developed this 750 square foot footprint where we had been doing 2 bedroom, 2 bath in them. And one of the designers on my team, which that's a decent 2 bed, 2 bath size, like it's good. It's not like huge, it's not amazing, but one of my designers came to me and he's like, look, if we reduce the bedroom sizes to 10 by 10 instead of 12 by 10, which are not big bedrooms, but they're bedrooms and you can fit a queen bed in one. Like, um, anyways, he showed me the floor plan and he's like, look, this is a tighter fit, but you can get a 3 bedroom, 2 bath in this. And
In
so,
750 square.
mhm. Now,
I'm picturing an RV shower, like
yeah,
the tone and the shower
no,
are the same. And
regular tub kit showers, like your normal, um, but
is it
your
1.5 bath or actually 2 bath?
it's 2 bath,
Wow.
but your living area is just not ginormous now.
Yeah.
Now you've got a like a 21 by 13 living room area that includes a kitchen on one of the ends,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's a tighter thing.
Right.
My wife and I, our first property that we bought was a little condo. It was 912 square feet, and so as I was looking at the livable space in the condo that we had,
Yeah.
with it was like 10% less just with the way that we laid out the floor plan.
Yeah.
And so it's like that was totally fine for us until we had 3 kids and then it was a little too tight, but we were also in a privileged position to upgrade at that point.
Right.
But we would have and I know families that raised 4 kids in those condos.
I don't know if I like your use of the word privilege so much for like you worked for that, right? I mean,
Yes, but I also at that point was financially capable to move up,
right,
right?
but when you say privilege, was that money just handed to you or did you work for it?
No, but it is still it's still look, I know a lot of friends that work very hard at what they
Yeah, yeah,
do
that's fair.
and they don't move up that way.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
got in a career path and they did the thing and it's like
Yeah, and they're on
great.
the hamster wheel and
That's right. And I make
yeah,
it's like okay, I'm making $25 an hour and I keep working hard and in 4 years from now I'm going to make 32
yeah,
or
yeah.
5 years in.
But okay, but man, is that privilege or life choices? Not to degrade on either side of it, but
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, there's so many factors that go into that. And one of the factors is who do you know
that's huge.
and what is your mentality? Like
Yeah.
because
Who do
it
you know? Who do you know is actually
it,
huge?
it's
You could call that one potentially privilege, right? Because those connections can change
yes,
your world.
100%.
Yeah. No,
And
that's fair.
so there's that.
Mindset is your choice.
Yeah, but however, I'm still gonna push back on that. And the reason and I there are absolutely that is a thing. Like we're all autonomous over ourselves, but that doesn't mean that our conditioning was not given to us in a certain way.
Nurture and nature both impact you very
They
heavily,
do,
right?
they
So
do. And so I don't want I grew up in a wealthy family, relatively speaking. My dad was an entrepreneur.
yeah,
Um, I've got ADHD. I hyper focus on stuff. Like it served me well in the career path that I'm on.
yeah.
And so
I got the opposite ADHD, the no focus one.
yeah, so but to me, privilege doesn't mean that I don't have to work. It means that if I work very hard and the person that grows up in a different situation, in a different circle, works just as hard, maybe even harder, they don't end up in the same spot as I do.
Okay, my only counter to that is I grew up more middle class,
Yeah.
but not me. But I had a friend, um, my best friend, that grew up in the worst,
Yep.
situation. But and some of who we know, somebody pushed him in the right direction. But
Yep.
that guy came from a really poor life in a small apartment in Diamond Bar, no real opportunity, not a lot of connections,
Yep.
and he makes way more money than I do now.
Yeah.
His mindset and his drive to learn, to be a programmer. He's a programmer, to learn to be a programmer and to slave over going through the books and that tedious, like, so that's where I struggle. Like I 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
And he did have a friend that pushed him down that path. So who you
Yeah.
know is still so important, but
Yeah. And mindset. And look,
mindset's so important, I
yeah.
guess. But
And so, Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? Like, I mean, I know entrepreneurs in general love that book. And I had Rich Dad. Like, that was my dad's mentality. And
yeah,
so that it was an easy transition. It did not feel like a big risk to do what I was doing. And
right.
by the way, as I was making these hard decisions, and yes, I worked long hours, and yes, there have been many things that hit and landed, and some
You got a huge safety net, essentially.
some genius like that I latched on to, and some smarts that I've got. Fine, all of those things, fine.
Yeah.
But if I didn't have some of the pieces that already helped me line up mentally, I would not be where I'm at today. And so I can look at that and I can say that is privileged. Now, I don't need to say, I don't have to compare every scenario, because the reality is everybody's exactly not the same.
Yeah,
Nobody's the same.
yeah. I guess it's just the privilege has this stigma now, and it's used in a way. But I do
Sure.
want to say though that, I mean, that resonates with me. My dad was a middle class. He was he worked on like the machines. He wasn't a factory worker, but he worked in the factory, the big cup.
Yep.
But the reason I mention that is my whole drive right now is so that my son is privileged, right? Like my whole
Yes.
somebody, the guy Drew that was on the podcast yesterday asked, he's like, what? Like I have a goal to sell the business, or be in a position to be able to exit the business in 5 years for like 5 million, whatever it might be. And he's like, well, what's your backup success if that doesn't happen? I go, it all that matters is to me, like my whole drive that supports what you're saying is if I've got some money in the bank that can help my kid do what he needs to do when he gets to be professional. If it's college education or if it's starting a business, whatever, I want to have money to be able to support that. And then I want him to have a name that he can lean on reputation wise, not to open doors like for whatever, but to have something that if he comes to Riverside and wants to be a professional, an entrepreneur, or have a business or whatever, that he has a reputation behind his name. So
Yeah.
I say, on one hand, I'm like, I don't know if I like that term, but on the other hand, I'm trying to build that scenario for my son. So it's kind of a bit of both, I guess.
Yeah. And all things are not equal. So like when I look at that thing, I could have not been hardworking. I could have not taken the
There's a lot of
opportunities.
people that get complacent in your situation and still have a nice, comfortable life, but they
Right.
don't leverage it to anything bigger and make it like you did. So the mindset part,
Yeah.
you do it. You do get to, if you have the mindset and you get a higher jumping off point, there's
Yeah.
value in that. That can't be argued.
And the backstopping, I think, was a really big factor for me as I go out and take risk, and have taken risk in the past, where it's like, hey, I know that worst case scenario, I'm going to be able to figure it out, even if I need to borrow money from my dad, like
Yeah, that's huge.
whatever.
No, that's huge.
And I haven't had to do that.
Right.
That wasn't my thing. At the same
Yeah, but if
time,
somebody else is like, if I take this risk and it fails and I'm on the streets, I
yeah,
don't have that backstop.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then also, yeah, I mean, so I don't look at privilege as a derogatory term. I don't
I
see
think
that.
that's my problem. Is a lot of people use it derogatorily, and that's what my mindset's thinking when you're saying that.
Yeah, and I get that. Like
Yeah,
I see it. I do think that one of the best positions that I can be in life is where I am able to look at things for what they actually are. And I'm not saying I do that. I try to do that. And so I had somebody early on in my career that said something to my dad as I was having success. And he was in a similar business to me and had done business with my dad in the past. And he's like, oh, well, if Scott was my dad, like I wonder where I would be.
hmm.
And dude, at the time when I was like 29 years old and I'm pulling 80-hour weeks, like that stung. And I'm like, hey, that's BS. Like I'm working hard, da da da.
Yeah,
But the farther that I get in my life, now this particular person, yeah, maybe they would be farther ahead, but I don't think that they would be in the same place because their drive and their different things, it just they're not the same person.
yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
fine. But well, I do think that it was meant as a bit of insult to me
Yeah, slight.
and like a slight to me and like hidden compliment or whatever to my dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've looked at that now over the last 12 years since that happened, or like then since that comment was made, and it has had an effect on me. And so I'm not a religious guy. I grew up religious, but I a while back saw on TV Joel Osteen was talking, and he said something that stuck with me, like, and just like hit me to the core. And he talked about how his dad had started this small community church and that he stood on the shoulder of giants. There's the shoulders of giants. And so he's like, I didn't just do all of this. It didn't just
Yeah.
show up and happen for me. I leveraged the thing that I had, the understanding that I had, the privilege that I had to be in that scenario, and
Yeah.
then
The opportunity
the
that you had.
opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what I see. And that back to your question, or like your statement about what you want for your son. I got 6 kids. And so I I'm driven to make sure that they are in a position to find whatever that is that's going to make them happy. And
Yeah.
I believe that in Western society, like just probably the world in general, it's fine. Money is power, right? And so the classism that exists within our society does make it seem like, well, one job is more valuable to society than another. But I no longer believe that concept. I think that things that I do are important to me and to the people around me. And I'm not saying that it's not important, but damn it, my kids' teachers are very important.
Yeah.
They matter.
Yeah.
The people that run nonprofits and they go out and do good things, amazing things for our world, they matter.
Yeah.
They may not make a lot of money.
They don't, right? I mean, at the end of the day,
They
they really
don't.
don't.
But they inform the kind of community that we currently live in and the kind of community that we get to live in the future. And so I want my children to be successful in life. But what successful in life means doesn't have to be money.
Right.
And so if I am able to generate enough wealth over a period of time that not only maybe do I get to backstop them, but maybe download some of the things in life to them, even in their young adult lives, that are beneficial, and that like I don't want you to have to work 80 hours a week. I don't want that for you,
Yeah.
unless that's like your drive,
Yeah.
like, and you're super excited about it, great, go do it.
Yeah.
Support it all day long. I think people should do things that they're well suited for and that they're happy doing. I think that those things are important for happiness in life, but I don't want my kids having to trade 80 hours for money to survive.
Just to be in
Yeah.
the system, I mean, essentially.
Or even if they just want luxuries, right? They're like,
Yeah.
oh, I really, well, okay, cool. If I'm successful enough and I create the opportunity for those luxuries to exist for them,
Yeah.
and so those are some of the things that I think about. My oldest just got married last year, and her and her husband are going to school, and they're looking at graduate school now. And so one of the things that we were able to talk to them about is like, hey, as you guys are making decisions, like, I think that it's important that you are aware. And I've told my kids this growing up, like, my goal is to pay for their education, like however high they're going to go. I want to be, that's what we've been doing. With our, now we have 2 in college. But, and then I want to help them out with a sizable down payment on their first house so that they can afford to live in the area that they are trying to be. Now, I don't live in Beverly Hills, so I ain't trying to put them in Beverly Hills,
Right.
but we want to be able to help them get that first leg up.
Yeah.
And so by helping them not come into life with debt, that's privilege, right? By helping them have a down payment to create financial stability for their future, and stop that housing inflation, that's privilege.
Yeah.
And I want to download that to them.
Yeah.
But then because of that, we want them to be able to, like I said, look at those career paths, look at the things that they feel like they can contribute good things to the community,
Yeah.
and they can contribute a healthful existence for themselves and happiness within their work. And so,
And not have to decide if the paycheck is good or not for that good effort,
yeah,
or like to put them where they want to be in life, like
for sure. And
personally and professionally, I guess,
yeah,
whatever.
and my son-in-law is getting into finance. He's about to finish his degree in December, and then is looking at master's programs, probably doing MBA. And so I have my daughter is going the social work, not social work, marriage and family therapy track. And so my business isn't probably like a super great fit for her, but for him, it may be. And
Yeah,
so I was very clear with them. I was like, look, I believe in nepotism. So
I don't have any problem with
absolutely,
that. Yeah.
like if you guys think that this is a fit for you,
If my
that
family built something, why wouldn't I let my family take advantage of it? Like
I
that's
I
the
mean
crazy part of it.
I want to create that. And so, but
Now, nepotism where the person's useless and they have the job anyway,
no,
no.
and
But
we
if
don't.
you want to work towards it, and like best thing in my world would be for my son to take over my business. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
But
yeah. And so that's fun. And so, who knows, we may never work together. That's fine.
yeah,
But I at least wanted that to be out there and for them to know that that's my value system. That's
yeah,
my belief is that um I got six of these people that are mine. You know, my wife Ashley and I we chose to have a big family and we love all the kids that we have around us and it's a fun thing, but those are the one things that I can count on, like that I need to make sure that I'm showing up for them. I decided to bring them into this
yeah,
life that we've created, and so my responsibility to them, I feel like, is to download the benefits that I've been given, as well as, it's kind of like when you go to a campsite and you're supposed to leave it better than you found it.
yeah, yeah,
Like, that's what I want to do for
yeah.
my kids.
As you should. Like, yeah, there shouldn't be any reason that's. Yeah, that's just the way it should be. What's the point of working for all this stuff if you can't
For
pass
sure.
on your kids? That's the only reason you're even freaking here,
And
right?
it's,
Like, I
and
mean,
especially if you get into the position, we're now in the position with what we own as rental property. We're in the position now where we've created generational wealth. That's cool. It's
that's huge.
exciting.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's a goal
But
for sure. It's a big goal.
we're
It's
we're
not
like
easy.
we're coming into this position over the next 5 or 6 years. If our trajectory remains the same, we're coming into a position where we create multi-generational wealth. And so then from that perspective, as I'm looking at my kids and I'm looking at like what are the things that we could do with this life and what do they get to do, that it's a different perspective that I'm making a mind shift into. I'm not there, um, but that's one of the things that I keep looking at. But as I over the last couple years, as my daughter's pretty young, she got married pretty young. She's 19 years old, and so really, it's been over the last couple years where my head started turning on. Like, crap, how would she even afford a house? Like, how's that a real thing? Like with what she can make, and one of speaking back to privilege, and I'm sure I'm going to get some hate for this, but I see a lot of silly snide remarks from boomers, um, that are like, oh, well, like those people that are renting, like they're lazy, or that there's a reason that they can't
No, it's
afford.
messed
Like,
up right now. No,
we saved up for our house, and it's like, cool. When you made $13,000 a year, and the average house price was $40,000, guess what? You could afford that payment with zero down or
even with the high
3%
interest rates at
down.
the time, whatever it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The affordability index is out of control right now.
yeah.
So for the average family that's now with two incomes making $80,000 a year, but the average house price is $600,000,
Yeah, yeah, it's
that's
a much
much,
different
much
multiplier,
less
and those
affordable.
payments are crazy. Well, and even renting isn't easy. There's a young kid in my office that used to be here, and he wanted to get an apartment, but they want three times
Yep,
your
that's
rent.
right.
Your income is going to be three times your rent, right?
Right.
So he needs to be making 7, 8, 9 grand a month at 20 years old. Like, who's doing
Yeah,
that?
and so so the opportunities are different, and so as I've looked at that, that becomes this intersection where my personal reality starts to inform my understanding of the world around me and what that looks like for my kid to get a leg up.
Yeah.
And so that those are the things that we're concerned about with housing, and condoization we feel like is a really big deal for that, because if I can go out, and the average entry level house is somewhere in that $500,000 range to high
Because the median's
fours.
697, I think was I just saw.
Yeah, yeah. And so even those condos I told you about that I lived in, they're like $430,000. But you're in this huge condo complex. It's like
Yeah.
it's this
It's just
thing.
yeah.
And so now, if I can go out and create something as an investor or as a homeowner that costs me $150,000, maybe 200 grand, and it's now worth 350 or 400,000, how many affordable units hit the market over a 10-year period? A lot.
Yeah, it just blows up
It,
potentially, which will also make supply now skyrockets, and hopefully that helps bring prices to a more reasonable place.
yeah, and so I had a little online debate with somebody. I like to get on the socials and have fun from time to time, where they were like, "Well, no, like that's in a fixed price model. This is a variable price model, blah blah blah." And I'm like, okay, cool, cool. What they were saying is that condoization will be horrible for housing.
Hmm.
They're saying that that is going to cause upward pressure on all of the housing prices. And I disagree with that. And now what it does do is it makes a big backyard more valuable.
Well, yeah,
That's fine.
true.
But if that big backyard now is worth $100,000 or $200,000 more, and then I take a look at housing inventory on a whole, I'm like, yes, but now I have 4 units. And so if you take the average cost per house,
Yeah.
if I've got three $350,000 units in my backyard, that main unit itself that was maybe $700,000 is now, if you sell it individually, is probably only worth 6.25.
Yeah.
You degraded the value of that by
Cost
removing.
averaged all the
Yeah.
right.
And so you end up with more affordable housing. And so I don't believe that what it does is it drops the value of housing at all. What I do believe that it does is it drops the housing inflation, especially for entry level and especially for renters. And I know that this has been happening in Washington, Oregon, and in Hawaii.
Hmm.
And so there are case studies on this, and you can see what the effect is. There are some new laws in California with multifamily units as well that are similar to that kind of thing, where they're coming out and saying, "Hey, here's what needs to happen." The beginning of that law that has to do with multifamily, the nexus for that in all of the notes, and like they do these studies on laws that they're about to drop. So the notes for that were very specific, and we are 3.5 million housing units short in California. So that's why we're creating these ADU laws. That's why we're creating these multifamily laws.
Yeah.
And the reality is, without inventory, we cannot put pressure on the housing inflation. We can't put pressure on not just the housing inflation from a sale value, but from a rental value. And I argue that the rental value is much more important to the bottom end of our society from a financial perspective, because you go to somebody that's making mid 6 figures a year and you're like, hey, you know what? Yeah, that house that you wanted to buy, it was $3,500 a month 2 years ago. No, it's 46. And if you're making 250 G's a year, it's like, oh, that sucks.
But I'll still do it.
But you know what you're doing? You're still going out to dinner.
Yeah.
You're still going on vacations.
Yeah.
It's okay. But if you tell a renter that was renting a 1-bedroom apartment 4 years ago for $1,600 a month, and now you're telling them it's $2,200 a month. That
Yeah.
is earth shattering.
Yeah.
They
Because
aren't
they're only
going
making
out to
four
dinner.
or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not going out to dinner. They're living on mac and cheese.
Yeah.
And so I do think that it is important that that housing inventory gets created, and hate groups be damned. We're going to do it. And it has been fun for us, though, to be a part of that thing. We've worked with some nonprofits that rent those properties from us. Um, we've been able to do some of those altruistic things, but then also being able in 2016, we took so many of our investors out of state because that was the only place that it made sense anymore.
Mm.
But being able to pour money into our economy, into our society, matters to me. And so we have 43 construction projects actively going on right now, today.
In
And
Riverside or
in the Inland Empire.
Yeah.
And so when I look at that, the economic impact that that has is a thing. It's significant. And we're in the process now of starting to scale that. So maybe that number is up to 75 or 100 projects at any given time within the next year or so. I think that that's important because those people that are working on those jobs go out and spend money in our market.
Yeah.
The building materials, the fees that go to the city,
Yeah.
like the loans that we get on them after the fact. Laura Locke is our preferred lender. We work with her almost exclusively, and that matters to her office.
Yeah.
They care about that.
Of course.
My title, my escrow, all of these people care. You know, and so by being able to bring that money back in state, I get to see the benefits of the economic impact of that. I get to see the housing that's created. And then I love helping people build wealth through real estate.
Mm.
You know, you get a dentist that calls you and it's like, okay, great. I'm 47 years old. I'm just finishing paying off my student loans. And now I've got 20 more years that I'm going to work, but how do I retire? And you know, it's like these golden handcuffs that you give to them when, yeah, they may make $500,000 a year, which sounds like a lot of money until you take their taxes, until you figure out that they were in school for 14 years or whatever.
And have a $750,000, $600,000 student loan.
And then
Dental's
had to pay
crazy.
that. Yeah, and had to pay that down. So they don't really get to worry so much about retirement until they're coming up on 50. Mm-hmm. And so that's disadvantaged, and we need dentists.
And they got 10 years potentially that they probably want to retire in 10 years or so.
Yeah, yeah. And so, like, as I look at that, being able to sit down and consult with those people and show them that vehicle and then do all the other things in the process it's been very rewarding for me. And then also being able to get into the position over the last few months, or it's been about a year that we've been in development on the private equity, but where we get to say to them like, hey, actually, if you go out and do this yourself and go through the pain, you're going to get 100% of whatever that creates, but it's likely that you'll do it once or twice. And with the fund, the cool part is they come in and bring in the money. They don't have to touch or do anything, but when they exit at the end, we're doing a 10-year fund. At the end, if they would have run their own projects, at least with our case studies and what we've been doing, they will come out making 2 to 3x what they would have made if they went and actively did these projects themselves. Mm-hmm. Because instead of doing a thing one time, we get to take that same pool of money and recycle it over and over and over within the fund. So what may have been one event, you know, per a pool of money, now becomes 6 to 12 to 15 or 20 events over that 10-year fund time frame. And so with conservative returns, we still do better for them. They get all the benefits of real estate, that they get the appreciation, they get the depreciation expense, they get the increase in cash flow. So they get all of these.
Because not only are you able to reinvest money pulled back out of a project, but then you also have the cash flow from the rent.
Yeah.
And as you add more and more and more and more properties, now that cash flow is increasing and gives you more opportunity.
Yeah. And so it's fun for us to finally have a product. Like I've been partnering up and doing flips and things like that with investors like this for years. But it's now fun for us to have a product where it's like, no, we don't have to go out and do a deal with you, return your money, and then in 3 months we find another deal and do it again. That's like the hamster wheel and helping people make a good return on the money that they have,
Yeah.
but it doesn't do the wealth building mechanism from a perspective of safely leveraging real estate. Because if if I get to put $100,000 down on something that's worth 500 grand, but that $500,000 property doubles in value in a 10-year time frame, well, I made $500,000 in equity off of $100,000. And so what was my return? Um, it was an annualized return of about 50%. And that's really cool.
That's crazy. Yeah.
But where it gets really powerful, which is what we've kind of been doing with our own portfolio, is where you put that $100,000 in, but when you're done with developing the project, you've pulled it back out.
Mm.
And so you get to go use it again.
It's like going to Vegas and gambling, and then once you've doubled your money, you put your original money back in your pocket, and then you keep gambling,
yeah,
and then whatever, then it's all profit at that point, essentially.
Yeah. And so that's one of the fun things for us as we've kind of grown throughout our journey and kind of morphed into something different. Now, I identified as a flipper, real estate investor, and real estate broker before that.
Yeah.
Like if you asked me a year ago, what did I do? That's what I would tell you. Now, what I will tell you is I'm a micro developer. Like we develop small projects, 30 units and under, we're about it. We're interested in doing that kind of a project. So I have to be a real estate agent or have a great understanding to do that. And so that's a vertical of our business. I have to know how to get the plans permitted and pushed through the city. So we have the design company. I have to be able to get the construction done. And so we develop that construction company and run all those projects. And then I have to be able to manage the projects at the end.
Right.
And so we've got to do all the property management. And so we have that arm of our business. So it's put us in a position now where I'm not a real estate flip hacker. We're these micro developers. And so as that's the case though, it gives us an opportunity to download returns and download opportunities to our investors that otherwise are pretty untenable.
That's full service. And
yeah.
So that was a good segue. I was going to ask, even before you mentioned that, I was about to ask. So for the viewers, entrepreneurs thinking about how to leverage their different businesses, what business they should be in or something, I think it's neat that you guys have taken your opportunity and taking control of a lot of different components in the process, right? Like you were just saying. So if you could just take a second and touch on each of the 6 or 7 businesses that you have, just maybe the name of it, a brief synopsis of what it's about, and then kind of how they all tie together. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, for sure. So we have, to start out, we have Power of Two Realty. It's a real estate company. We buy and sell houses through it for ourselves, for clients. Mainly that's a retail facing business with people that just need to sell their house or buy a rental or just buy a home to live in.
Okay.
Then we have Investors First Property Management, which is our property management arm. And it was really specifically created for people that have multiple properties. And really our main goal through that is to help them maximize what cash flow they can make out of those properties. ADU Design Group is our design company where we do plans for lot splits. We do plans for ADUs. We do the engineering for all of those plans in-house. We have a few engineers that work on that team. And
permits too, right?
Sorry?
Permits too on that side, or is that
permits too? Yeah. So we get permits issued. So we take somebody that wants to build an ADU. They don't have to work with us, construct it, but we can help them get their plans done. And then we have our construction company, which is called ADU Makers. And that company goes out and builds ADUs for our business. And then also for just regular individuals that are looking to do that or investors. And then we also have this group called Triplex Millionaire. It's a community that we've created To teach people who are flippers that want to get out of the business of flipping.
Mm.
Like flipping is also these golden handcuffs, right? Like you can make good money at it, but how you exit? If you keep a certain percentage of the properties, it works, but you can't just keep them
Mm.
because even if you buy something $100,000 under market, it doesn't cash flow right now.
Mm.
So you've got to do value add to be able to make that work. And so that's what we're teaching people in our community how to do. We have coursework and whatnot like that we teach people how to do that. And then we have Vector Escrow. And so we're partners on that company with a few other producing agents out in Temecula. And so we've been involved in that for a couple of years. And so those really are the verticals that we have in our business. Now, there is one thing that's in common with all of those businesses, and that is development. That's real estate sales, that's attraction. So, what I have learned over the last 3 years that I didn't really quite understand previously was that if you want to be very successful at something, then and that's my like projection of where we're going, not specifically where we're at. I'm not saying, oh, we're super successful.
Pretty
We,
successful.
we are successful, but what I'm saying is like, this isn't brag. This is real. If I would have dove in deeper sooner into a specific thing, we would be in a better position as a company. And so it is, I now look at most of the companies that are very successful in any space. And what you find is that they specialize in a thing. And then that thing that they specialize in, whatever is tangential to it,
They control.
they control
Yeah.
because that's how you scale. You can't scale when you send a guy a set of plans and you don't actually know where he's at on it, and you call him up and he won't tell you.
Yeah.
And what he tells you is not quite true when you call
And the
and check with
costs
the
are
city.
different. Like there's margins that are added through the process. And
Yeah.
the Drew was here yesterday. And we were talking about a construction guy that did just that. He was at like 150 million a year or something, and part of that was like he started bagging the concrete in Vegas. He bought the material company. You know what I mean? It's like anybody that was relevant to that process, he was like, all right, time to control it. That's
Yeah.
you know
For sure. And so what we're doing now, like we're not done with our verticals. Like those are just some of the things that we've done. And so there will be a few more companies that we start over the next couple of years. But the key is they're only things that take us directly into our niche and that we're dealing with on a daily basis that we need. Otherwise, we don't have interest. You could tell me about this new startup and it's like, gosh, you could make 50% on your money if everything goes right, fine, whatever. I'm not interested. And I'm not
it doesn't
interested
support the overall goal.
because it doesn't support what we're hyper focused on.
Yeah.
And going deep is so much more important than going super wide. I wanted to pick up every deal that came over and made sense. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And in our fund, one of the things that we've done to support that thought process is we have decided that there are 4 cities that we're buying for in that fund.
Hmm.
And so, because once again, we specialize in this product, but if we also specialize in a city, we talk to the city of Riverside every day of our life. We talk to the city of Moreno Valley, the city of Redlands, and now Loma Linda.
And that comes back to who you know making the opportunities or the
Yeah,
situations easier to work through.
right. And then the relationships that you build and people knowing what you're about and being able to push back and not be an a-hole.
Have candid conversations and respect each other.
And so, but from a scale perspective, and that doesn't mean that we'll never work in other cities. Absolutely, we will. But in this thing at this time, that's what we dive into. And so, my recommendation is to other entrepreneurs, if the goal is we want to go from 100 projects a year to 2 or 3 or 400 projects a year, we can't do that unless we control the verticals. We have to be able to go a little bit wider, to go deeper.
Yeah.
And that's what we're acknowledging. And a few of my business partners are very ADHD like me. Like we go, like you just go.
Yeah.
And so some of these things have been extremely difficult for us to set up all the back end systems and do that. And we have brought on support staff to help us in those things. And
Yeah, because you still got to tie them all together and make sure they communicate clearly. Just because you own them all doesn't mean they're going to work well together. They're still
yes,
individual silos of people and
yes,
processes and stuff. So I can see
yes.
that.
And so that's what I would say to the entrepreneur. Regardless of what business it is, now you have to have enough of a scale of a thing to support the adjacent business.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are lots of opportunities to look at in that position. And so um uh, we are excited about what is going on in our business, but we're more excited to see how it affects the lives of other people. We're excited for the opportunity for us to create a massive amount of housing. And one of the tangential businesses that we are going to start working on, and we're working on this right now, is a business that does what we're doing, but specifically as a nonprofit.
Nice.
So we want to do that where we are only right now we're building like this middle housing, but our goal would be to build like true affordable housing.
Like the tiny house project, like that kind
Yes.
of
But
nonprofit house stuff.
yes, but using the same concept that we're already using. And so of the purchase, refinance, rents, repeat, that kind of thought process, because
But now that income has to be put back into creating more opportunities for people to live because you can't pull it out profit. It's a nonprofit.
well, yes, I mean, look, the way that nonprofits work is they work like as a for-profit business as well. Like you can take income
Well, you
from
can have
that.
salaries, right?
Yes,
Which
correct.
unfortunately can be up to like 96% of or some
Yeah,
crazy, but
and I'm not looking at this from a perspective of how do we get rich off of this
yeah.
vertical. Not at all. I'm looking at this and saying there's a project that was just done that I became made aware of recently for affordable housing in the Inland Empire, and it was 100 units and it cost $24 million to build. So there was lots, I believe the way that it all went down was credits and grants and things like that. And so now that stays affordable housing, fine. That's a good thing. But I look at that thing and I say, if I can make our capitalism and the model that we figured out, couple it with altruism and say, how now do we take that same kind of pool of money and instead of just standing up 100-unit apartment complex that's
Yeah.
affordable housing, which is an awesome achievement, but how do I use the model that I've learned how to do and create out of that same pool of money 14, 1,600, 2,000 doors over a 10-year period of time?
Spread out geographically too, so they
Yeah,
can be not
right.
just some concentrated area and
Right. And
turn into the
so,
projects.
yeah, and that's a good segue for me, because one of the things that I'll say too is like, great, you have that affordable apartment complex at the end of your street. Are you happy? Probably not. But what we do has been coined as quiet density. So if you have 10 of these projects within your neighborhood of 300 homes, you barely notice it.
Yeah.
But those 10
If they
projects,
were all in one building at the end of the street, it's going to stand out.
yeah.
That
And
makes sense.
so we're looking at this and saying, how do we leverage this thought process and prospect and these kinds of projects to create the most housing? And look, there's some benefits that come from creating affordable housing. If you're doing that in a nonprofit, you don't pay property taxes.
Hmm.
If you are doing that in this kind of a product, you also get incented loan types. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and the other institutions out there have product that's like, hey, I know my regular interest rate is 7.5%, but if you're doing affordable housing, it's 5.5.
Hmm.
And so the way that we look at it, the cost of the project can be exactly the same to build. But if I've got no property taxes and a lower interest rate, and that cost me per unit $500 a month less, then I can put that property out in the market and serve somebody for $500 a month less than I would have had to otherwise. And then we just like keep.
Well, and I could be wrong, but the more you do that, the more you impact the overall rent prices, right, for affordable
Yeah.
housing. Because now you're bringing down prices. You're putting more inventory out there to lower costs. So
Yeah. Yep.
people are going to have to lower to compete if they want or whatever.
Yeah, and people have asked me like, aren't you concerned about competition? Aren't you concerned that other people are going to learn how to do this? And I'm like, look, there
They
is
need a million
such.
houses or whatever.
Yeah, that's
Like,
right.
how many?
If I could be in my wildest dreams, wildly successful with my partners and our team over the next 10 years, we would create like 10,000 units.
Yeah, 1%.
No, 0.01%.
0.01%.
Right.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we need the competition. Come help.
Yeah. And so like it's just it's a nothing burger. Like we're not really able to put in to what is actually needed.
Yeah. The pie's way too big to worry about other people eating
Yeah,
off of it.
and actually your math was correct. It is 1%, like a 10,000 on a million.
Yeah.
But that even still, that's without the need growing, right? Like
Right.
so.
Well, and that's 100 competitors of equal success. Like,
Right.
and that's big success. Like that's an accomplishment.
Yeah,
So
that's a lot. And so we look at it and we're like, no, everybody should go out and figure out how to build this. And that's why we launched our community. That's why we tell people like we have made significant money. We made millions doing this volume of project.
Yeah.
But we've also lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on making mistakes. And on my social media, I stand up and I say it. I'm like, oh, here's where we had a hit on this one,
Yeah.
and here's what it was. Like, there's no secret in the fact that your batting average includes a lot of strikeouts. Like that's what it is. Yeah,
you gotta swing.
Pop up flies, like all of that.
Some aren't as bad as the others, but they're still not home runs.
Yeah, and so that's why we've downloaded this community to people, because like when they get a run, a thought, or a scenario past us or past the other people in the community, they're able to determine like, oh no, this is a project we're not doing.
Yeah.
And here's why we're not going to do it.
Well, you joined EO too. It's a similar thing, like having people of similar mindsets that you can run ideas off of and commiserate with or celebrate with is super valuable.
So, yeah, but those are our business, those are verticals. And that's like for other entrepreneurs.
The umbrella of all of that though is, or at least most of that is Cash Flow California, right? That's kind of the umbrella that could be funneling stuff through.
Correct. So Cash Flow California is our Instagram. It's our website that we're
It'll be your website soon.
Yeah. And that's the way.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah. But that we can connect any of the verticals to the people. So one of the companies that I didn't mention, the fund is its own company too, right?
Right.
And so
ADU fund, right?
Yeah. So the California ADU fund, it's the first of its kind to go out and create this as an investment product. And so we've been early to market on many of these things, but ultimately, each of those businesses you can connect with through Cash Flow California. And so we wanted, as we've grown and had some breadth, we wanted to be able to download those resources to other people. And through doing that, a lot of the pain that we've experienced, we can resolve or take away or at least mitigate somewhat for people that want to come in.
You can at least lead them to the water. Hopefully they'll drink, right?
Well, whether we transact or not, like if somebody is able to make a better decision that saves them a lot of time or a lot of money, or helps them not go down a path that is going to not result probably in what their end goal is, then we're here for that. And
that's a win.
Yeah. And so so in each of those verticals, like we can be contacted that way, but then also, um, we do have agents that are investors that reach out to us a lot on Instagram and ask us questions. And for the most part, like a couple times, like we'll be like, oh yeah, do this, try that thing instead. But we launched our community for a reason,
Yeah.
because when I can do it in a spot, then
Well, and if they ask that question in that forum or whatever it is, and like if you direct message respond to them, they learn.
yeah,
But if they ask that question in a group of 100,000, whatever it is,
right.
now everybody gets to learn from it.
Right. And so that's where we at some point push back and say like, hey, we've created this so that people like you that are doing this thing
Yeah.
can have success. But like I can't sit and answer everybody's
Right.
question all day long.
Right. Right.
And so that's why we've created that community to be able to help people that want to do this as an investment strategy,
Yeah.
for people that want to just take a safe bet and get into middle housing and have the benefits from it, but don't want to be participatory from a perspective of any of the lift, signing on the loans,
Mm.
like um, if a rental payment is missed, like having to cover the mortgage anyways. Like if they don't want any of that, that's why we created the fund.
That's
And
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
but either way, they can connect with us on any of those things. And yeah,
Awesome. I could talk to you all day, man. It's
yeah, for
interesting
sure.
stuff. It's a space that I missed the mark on. I'm way behind on wealth building, especially through real estate. I mean, I short sold my house in '08. It was my biggest financial mistake that I regret to this day, right? I'm still trying to come back around from that. But I have big dreams and aspirations in real estate, and this is always a fun topic. But I know we're running a little bit long. I have an interview that I've got to get to, and I know you've got a super busy schedule. So I just want to thank you for being here,
My pleasure.
covering all that stuff. Everybody check out. I'll put the links for the different businesses. Definitely follow Cashflow California on the socials. There's a lot of neat. I love watching the videos and the
Yeah.
projects you're going through and what you guys are
Thanks.
accomplishing. So really appreciate you being here today.
Yeah. Thank you.